Welcome to the first patch notes video for Legends of Runeterra for this channel. I'll be doing this in a format that my older viewers will be familiar with when I covered patch notes in previous card games. The patch notes we got consisted of card changes and changes to the in-game economy. However, this video will only focus on the card changes. I have a separate video planned for the economy changes. I'll briefly mention some things regarding expeditions potential for a few of these cards, but I'll mainly be looking at each change from a constructed point of view. Also, since this will be my longest Runeterra video to date, likely, I will have timestamps for every card in the video description and as a pinned comment below for anyone that wants to skip to specific cards. Without further ado, let's jump into it. So we'll be covering the champions that got changed first, starting with Anivia. So Anivia can now block, is now a 7 cost, which is up from 6 cost. She now levels on Enlightened. She has 2 less attack and 1 additional hit point. And the Anivia also has 1 additional hit point and also levels on Enlightened. Now these changes are across the board. The level 2 is affected by this change as well. This isn't a nerf so much as a rebalance. Anivia was already pretty defensive, and these changes arguably make her even more defensive, especially now that she can block. But Anivia will definitely feel more fair, since you'll have more opportunities to stop her from leveling up. Unlike before, where you basically only had 1 turn to stop the transformation. All of these changes make sense because they play off each other so well. Leveling up when Enlightened means you have to hit 10 mana to flip this card, but now it costs 7 mana instead of 6, so it takes longer to hit the board, but you only need to keep Anivia alive for 3 turns instead of 4. Also, 4 HP puts her out of range of more removal spells. But if you choose to block, then that once again makes her vulnerable to those same removal spells. The list goes on. This is how I want to see the dev team approach rebalances on cards going forward. Very elegant change, in my opinion. Next we have Ezreal, and the level 2 Ezreal's Fleeting Mystic Shot now costs 2 mana, up from 0 mana. This is bad. So Ezreal was usually paired with Heimerdinger during the preview patch meta, and if you managed to have both out on the field, you would get a 0/1 turret with Challenger that would cost 0 to play. Now you get a 2 cost turret that's a 2/1 with Tough, which I would say is actually worse just because Challenger has a much better ability than Tough, especially if Tough is on a 1 health unit. Maybe there's still potential left with Lux, but the immediate future looks bad for Ezreal. He already didn't see a ton of play before and might not see any now. Next we have Vladimir. The text on Vladimir now simply reads, "You've had 6+ allies survive damage," instead of 6+ other allies. So this is a simple change to Vladimir's level up. This just means this now includes any copies of Vladimir that you have on the board. It's a small buff, but not a significant one. The only situation I can think of where you'd have multiple Vladimirs in play is if you're playing Thresh in your deck as well. This buff won't come up often, but it's nice to have. And the last champion is Tryndamere. Tryndamere's level 2 no longer has Tough. This is a slap on the wrist, to be honest. It means Tryndamere will be very, very slightly easier to deal with. But this guy is still a monster. He'll still see a ton of play. Moving on to the follower cards that got changed, starting with Battlesmith. Battlesmith is now a rare, and he was a common. So this changes nothing for Constructed, and is obviously aimed at expeditions. Battlesmith saw a decent amount of play during the preview patches in Constructed, and that will likely continue. I won't spend any more time on it, but I'll mention that Riot stated that the Elites archetype in Demacia were overpowering in expeditions, and this is their way of pulling back on that archetype. Interestingly, Silverwing Vanguard is moving from rare to common to keep rarity balance in Demacia. Moving on to Fleetfeather Tracker. This now only gains Challenger when you summon an ally. So I was never high on this card, even when it naturally had Challenger, but I do have to admit that I underestimated Challenger a little bit, at least when it's attached to small units like this. This could, and likely was, used as a way to lock down a defender for more aggressive Demacia decks to push damage through. And even if the tracker just got eaten without killing the blocker, it still dealt damage, and damage is permanent in this game. And that's worst case scenario. So I now see the value behind this card. Losing Challenger initially hurts, but this will probably still see play since Demacia is all about units and combat anyway. Next is Avarosan Hearthguard. This now has 5 health, which is down from its original 6 health. Huge nerf. This guy was basically in every deck running Freljord that could fit him in. 1 point of difference in any stat doesn't seem like much, but going from 6 to 5 means Hearthguard ends up dying to a lot more mid-game units that get played around this mana cost. Vladimir can now one-shot this guy, along with follower units like Radiant Guardian and now even the buffed Chempunk Shredder, which we'll get to later. But even Crimson Awakener trades up into this guy now. However, this actually shouldn't change Hearthguard's play rate much. He was played just as much for his ability in addition to his 5/6 stat line. And 5/5 is still at rate for a 5-drop, since there are now only 2 5-drops with stats above a 5/5. Because he still buffs all allies in your deck, you will continue to see this guy played in Freljord decks. Moving on to Catalyst of Aeons, this now costs 5, up from 4 cost. This was a ramp card seen in Freljord Shadow Isles control decks. This change does somewhat coincide with the Anivia change, making ramping into Anivia in general a full turn slower as well, if you need to do it with this card and you don't have any Wyrding Stones in play. But probably the bigger impact this has is now you're no longer able to skip turn 1, play a 2-drop on turn 2, usually Avarosan Sentry, then play this on turn 3 with the 1 spell mana you save from turn 1, which sets you up for a turn 4 Avarosan Hearthguard. Moving on to Wyrding Stones, this now has 3 health, which is down from 4 health. The hits keep coming for these guys. Wyrding Stones was already nerfed after the first preview patch with a mana cost increase thanks to the popular War Mother control decks during that time. Its health was also increased to 4 to compensate for that, but now that's being taken away again. With this second hit, this change might be even more impactful than the first. This now puts Wyrding Stones in range of a lot more damage-based removal like Black Spear, Grasp of the Undying, and the Box from Shadow Isles decks, and Get Excited from the Jinx discard aggro decks. Never mind other stuff like Augmented Experimenter and True Shot Barrage. It's very possible we'll be seeing a lot less ramp with this change now because of how much more removal this card dies to. Moving on to Cloud Drinker, this now has 5 health, which is down from 7 health, and its Enlighten has been removed. I can't help but think this was a change for the Expeditions format. I didn't get to play a lot of Expeditions personally, so I don't remember ever having to face this guy myself, but I could imagine it feeling unassailable in a limited format where you don't have easy access to good removal. This never saw a lot of play constructed during either preview patch, at least in my experience, outside of maybe some Karma decks. I could be wrong though. Its old ability probably didn't trigger much in Expedition, so maybe this change will affect constructed more than I think. Moving on to Flame Chompers. These now have 2 health, which is up from 1 health. Like the Wyrding Stones, Flame Chompers are getting changed again, but this time it's a buff, leaning back towards the direction of what the card originally did, though still not quite there. These used to cost 2 with 3 health, and the reasoning Riot gave for nerfing it to 1 health and reducing the cost to 1 was that they only wanted Flame Chompers to lock up a unit for 1 combat when used in the discard aggro decks. The mana cost usually doesn't matter in those decks, and they typically play this card for 0 mana at basically burst spell speed. 2 health is a nice change. Hopefully this is the happy medium that will still usually mean these guys only stick around for 1 combat, but once in a while they'll live to lock up a unit a second time. Next we have Back Alley Barkeep. This now has 3 attack, up from 2 attack. This actually doesn't change the play rate of this card, but like other cards we talked about, it's appreciated. This means it trades in combat a little better, but the real value behind Back Alley Barkeep has always been its ability. This has excellent synergy with Fading Memories and Chronicler of Ruin, among other cards in Shadow Isles, to form the core for a pretty grindy mid-range deck. These synergies will be the reason this card will continue to see some play, not the attack buff. Next we have Boomcrew Rookie. This now has 1 attack, which is up from 0 attack. This is a really nice change. I don't think this will necessarily skyrocket Boomcrew Rookie to being a staple in certain decks, but this might be enough for Piltover and Zond aggro players to at least consider this card when building their decks. It now hits the Nexus for 3 damage on an empty board, and more importantly, it can now fight for board control now that it can actually damage stuff. This might be far more annoying for opposing aggro decks to get past as well. Next we have Chempunk Pickpocket. This now has 3 attack, up from 2 attack. A welcome change since it helps this trade up versus other units potentially, but I think overall this won't increase the play rate of Pickpocket any more than it already is. You'll still need to pair this with spells that grant some form of evasion to get the full value out of this. One other nice thing though is that this is now a little better with cards that grant quick attack, like Rush or Legion Drummer. Next we have Chempunk Shredder. This is now 5 attack, up from 4 attack. Same deal as Chempunk Pickpocket. A welcome change, but this won't lead to Shredder seeing more play than it already does. Shredder gets played mainly for its ability, not its stats. The ability is fairly useful though, so I expect Shredder to still see some representation when open beta starts. Next we have Parade Electrorig. This is now a 2/4. It was a 3/3. This may look more like a side buff to some, trading a point of attack for a point of health, but health is more important than attack. Because it means the card is harder to remove. And going from 3 health to 4 health is huge in this game because while there are quite a few spells that deal 3 damage, there's almost nothing that does 4 damage for 1 card. So this will now require an extra damage source to get rid of if you don't want to spend harm removal on it, at least in most cases. Regardless, Parade Electrorig was mainly played for its ability, and it will continue to be the case. It didn't see a ton of play, and this stat change will probably only increase its play rate a small amount. Next we have Plaza Guardian. This is now a 6/6, up from a 5/5. A welcome change. Plaza Guardian certainly saw some play during the preview patches. It wasn't among the most popular strategies though, and despite this now being a 6/6, I don't actually expect this to see a lot more play. It's certainly more attractive now though. Next we have Sumsnipe Scavenger. This now has 3 health, up from 2 health. This will make no difference in constructed since Allegiance doesn't have enough support in the base set to justify playing a mono region deck. Also, while no longer dying to Mystic Shot, 3 health doesn't get it above some of the other removal spells in the game that I mentioned earlier, like Black Spear, among several others. This will probably have more impact in Expeditions since this means it trades down less often with cheaper units with lower stats. Next we have Used Cask Salesman. This now has 3 attack, which is up from 2 attack. This is a better buff than at first glance actually, unlike the other cards on this list that got a similar buff. Used Cask Salesman has been a role player in certain decks that take advantage of the casks it generates. It's good with other cards that can pump the tokens. Kalista is actually the best champion to pair with Used Cask Salesman in a Piltover and Zaun Shadow Owls aggressive deck that uses other ephemeral units like Shark Chariot and Ravenous Butcher. Is it better than the Hecarim decks that largely do the same thing? Maybe not, but your mana curve is probably even lower than those decks if you decide to go into Piltover and Zaun to play this guy. Next we have the Rekindler. This is now a 4/4, down from a 5/5. So this guy took a hit. 4/4 is a lot less attractive on a 6-drop than a 5/5. This is another card though that was played for the ability and not so much the stats. It's a core piece in certain Shadow Owls decks, so I expect it to continue to see play, but also expect it to die a little more often in combat. And finally we have Wraithcaller. This now has 3 health, which is up from 2 health, and it has now gained Fearsome. So this is effectively the same buff that Sumsnipe Scavenger got, and while I think Wraithcaller is a little better than Scavenger, I think this also makes little to no difference in constructed for the same reasons. There's still common removal that will one-shot this. It might be too early to say this, but I feel like Fearsome, at least on its own, is at its worst when it's on mid-game units with middling stats like this one, because your opponent will probably have something with 3 attack that they don't mind using to trade into by the time you're able to play units like this. Also, Allegiance lacks the support needed to be truly viable, and I doubt summoning Mist Wraith makes up for this. And we're finally done. If you guys made it to the end, thank you so much for the support. We just passed 2,000 subscribers on the channel. The growth has been crazy the past few weeks, so thank you again. If you enjoyed this format or just the video in general, let me know by hitting the like button below and leaving a comment. I do appreciate constructive criticism for this format as well, so leave feedback in the comments for that, as I'm always looking to do things better if I can. I've got more content planned, so if you don't want to miss future videos, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the notification bell below to guarantee that you get my videos in your sub box. Also, this is your reminder that since I have 1 day early access to the game, I'll be streaming Legends of Runeterra on Twitch starting the day before open beta officially releases and beyond. So make sure to follow me there so you can catch me streaming live. Link is in the description below. Thanks again for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.